So if you think your life is a total mess just because you have to wait in a long line at the clinic, or because pharmacy prices are a complete ripoff, I've got some fantastic news for you. You got incredibly, mind-blowingly lucky to be born in the 21st century. Seriously, pour yourself something nice, kick back, and get ready to celebrate the fact that you didn't have to face your 30th birthday somewhere in the Stone Age, or the filthy Middle Ages. Back then, a casual visit to the local medicine man felt like a plot from a budget horror movie, where the remedies were so messed up they'd make your hair stand on end. Our ancestors were tough as nails, and their medical style was simple. Only the most stubborn survived. Let's kick off this historical joyride with number 6, and it's a basic broken bone. Imagine you're out hunting a mammoth, you trip over your own feet, and snap your leg. Back then, a crooked leg meant you couldn't run, which meant your tribe would straight up leave you by the nearest bush for the wolves to chew on. You needed a fix right here, right now. Obviously, plaster casts didn't exist. Instead, the prehistoric doctor would drag you to the river, scoop up a handful of thick, freezing mud, mix it with some torn grass and leftover fur from a recent kill for extra durability, and literally concrete your limb into this clay spacesuit. The whole thing would bake dry in the sun, turning into a heavy-ass stone cocoon. The bone inside might actually fuse back together, but walking around with 11 pounds of crusty dirt on your leg was a whole different level of fun. The main goal was not to get caught in the rain, or your medical splint would literally liquefy and wash right down into your shorts. But if a muddy leg sounds bad, number 5 brings us the joy of gut parasites. Prehistoric humans absolutely loved eating raw-ish meat and drinking water out of the first puddle they stumbled across, so their bellies were basically hosting non-stop block parties for giant worms. Your stomach would bloat up like a balloon, everything hurt, and you had to take action. The ancient cure completely broke all logic. To get rid of the poison inside you, you had to ingest even more poison. A person would intentionally gorge themselves on toxic wild berries or bitter tree bark until their body hit the emergency evacuation button. The patient would throw up so violently that the worms inside would utterly lose their minds from the chemical attack, pack their bags, and exit the premises along with everything else in the stomach. Brutal, disgusting, but it got the job done 100% of the time. Number 4 takes us to open wounds and bleeding. A tiny scratch from a predator's claw could punch your ticket to the afterlife in a matter of days just from a basic infection. You had to stop the bleeding at all costs. And the prehistoric first aid kit offered 2 choices, each one worse than the last. Option A was to plaster the wound with a culinary masterpiece made of ash, spiderwebs, and fresh wild animal poop. Yeah, you heard that right. They would literally rub feces into raw, open meat. If that didn't do the trick, the doctor pulled out plan B, a glowing ember straight from the campfire. They would just cauterize the wound on the spot. The smell was unforgettable, but the bleeding stopped. If the patient didn't die from sheer pain shock right then and there, they actually stood a pretty decent chance of surviving for another couple of weeks. At number 3, we have the classic headache, which in ancient times was treated with a method that still gives modern archaeologists a massive migraine. If you were suffering from a nasty split brain headache or intense cranial pressure, the shaman would deliver a definitive verdict. Evil spirits were trapped inside your skull box, and they just needed an exit door. The doctor would grab a sharp piece of flint or obsidian, which actually cuts cleaner than a lot of modern scalpels, and start methodically, millimeter by millimeter, sawing a literal circle right into your crown. The most insane part about this whole trepanation story is the statistics. Archaeologists keep digging up hundreds of skulls from that era with perfectly healed bone edges around the holes. This means people didn't just survive having a hole drilled into their head without a single drop of anesthesia while a shaman banged a drum in their face. They actually managed to live with it for years. Apparently, the demons really did fly away, taking the last bits of the patient's sanity with them. Now let's fast forward a bit closer to civilization, right to number 2, where a lovely ancient cure for cataracts awaits. Imagine you're slowly going blind, the world around you is turning into a blurry fog, and the local doc offers you a quick operation. The procedure was called couching. The doctor would walk up to you, tell you not to blink, pull out a long, thick metal needle, and without even a hint of pain relief, stab it directly into your eyeball. The goal of this nightmare fuel was purely mechanical. The doctor had to hook the blurry lens with the needle and push down with all his might until the lens snapped off its fibers and dropped straight to the bottom of your eye. Light would instantly flood back in, and the patient could actually see vague silhouettes again. Mind you, because nobody back then had ever heard of the word sterile, about half of the patients ended up completely losing their eyes to gruesome infections shortly after. But hey, the method managed to stick around for hundreds of years. And finally, number 1. The undisputed heavyweight champion of medical insanity, the medieval cure for plague bumps. When the Black Death was mowing down Europe by the millions, people's lymph nodes in their neck and groin would swell up to the size of apples, turn pitch black, and rot out. The pain was so intense it drove people completely mad. And right here, the official medical establishment of the era enters the room with the Vickery method. The doctors would take a live chicken, pluck all the feathers clean off its butt, and tie that bare chicken rear end directly onto the oozing infected plague sore. The logic was breathtaking. They genuinely believed the terrified, panting bird would use its skin to literally suck the plague poison right out of the human. Naturally, the poor chickens died of infection almost instantly, so they'd swap them out for fresh ones on repeat until the local farmers completely ran out of poultry. Did it help? Heck no, but it gave the doctors a solid alibi, and it gave the patients some very strange company right before they kicked the bucket. And that is how our ancestors fought for survival, turning every single doctor's appointment into a literal game of Russian roulette. So next time you make a face while taking a bitter cough syrup or whine about a tiny vaccine shot, just think about the chicken, the red-hot iron, and that vintage mechanical hand brace drill coming for your skull. Which of these treatments blew your mind the most? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to read your thoughts. And make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more crazy stories about how humanity managed to survive in spite of its own medicine. Catch you in the next video.